individual I worked with for quite some time, and sure do think an awful lot of him, and is proud to be part of his training in the earlier years and see what he's become into. But it's Matt January, and he's a corporal with the Caldwell County Sheriff's Office, and has, I guess, been with them 9 years.
It'll be 10 in September.
10 in September, and it's all been patrol work.
Mm-hmm.
Ended up fooling around with mechanical engineering from Caldwell Community College before law enforcement, and ended up going to be LET at Caldwell Community College. Then entered in patrol 2014, and almost 10 years on patrol. But I guess for the last 6 years, you've been involved with canine work.
That's correct. Yep.
And you handle Pancho.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're the first canine officer to come talk on the episode and or show in general. So I wanted to get you in here to kind of give a little bit of detailed work on what it involves, what it requires to do canine work, and what is asked of the dog, what the dog doesn't realize, what you expect of the dog, and really its career span in general. So, but starting out in the beginning, what was your inspiration to decide to make law enforcement a career before BLET and anything?
So a lot of that hinged on my dad. He has worked at a fire department in our county for 33 years. And when I turned 16, and I was able to do the junior firefighter program all the way up through becoming full volunteer fireman. I started when I was 16, going to calls with him, kind of hanging out up there, and then they took me on in the junior program. And during that time, I encountered law enforcement multiple times, usually county, which has turned out to be the county I ended up working for. And every time, it was always impressive, just the job that the difference. Like I'm not bad-mouthing volunteer fireman or anything. I don't regret it at all. I ended up getting my EMT, ended up getting land search and rescue, ATV search and rescue, stuff that translated into the job later that has helped me. But every time I saw them roll up to the call, it's like, I really want to do that. That looks fun. And the first dog that I ever had was a retired canine, and he wasn't going to be able to
This is a personal dog.
Yeah. I was 6, 7 years old, and I got this dog, and he only lived 2 or 3 years. He's towards the end of his retirement, and that's also what's got me thinking about it. Wanting him to go ahead and retire and have that time with him, because I got to see the last years of his life. And the guy that gave him to me, the officer that gave him to me, was a highway patrolman, and he went down the list of all the commands, and I just thought it was cool. Like, I told the dog what to do, and it just did it, and it just loved me, and it just immediately bonded with me. So that kind of sparked it in the beginning, but then later on in life, it got reignited with encountering law enforcement more.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of drifted away from that goal, or that idea. It wasn't really a goal, and it was just an idea. I was like, I might like to do that one day. And then later on, whenever mechanical engineering, automotive didn't work out, and I was kind of looking for a job, that came back again. And I was like, this has been a theme, like, popping back into my head over the years, and I might want to try this. I was in martial arts at the time, and the instructor that was over it said, I think you've got the makings of somebody that can do this job. Like, it might not be for you, it might be, but I think personally that you should try it. I'm like, I don't know. I wasn't sold on it at all. And then whenever I lost my job, I was like, I'm going to start looking at this a little harder.
Mm-hmm.
And the longer I did it, I went through BLET and didn't pass the state exam. So I was like, well, maybe this isn't what I needed to do. And I go back, maybe a month or two has gone by since that. And my teacher again, I was like, why aren't you going to go back and do it again? Like, it don't let it bother, because it bothered me. I wasn't going to quit with it, but I felt like that was the end of it, and I wasn't going to do it again. And he convinced me to go back and try one more time. And the second time, I blew the test out of the water and got the academic award. And,
so you had taken a BLET course at Caldwell and made it all the way to the state.
Yep, graduate all the way to graduation. Yep.
And then the state bumped you off.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to repeat the entire class.
Yes,
POPAT, which
Yep.
is the physical abilities training test or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. I can't remember all those acronyms. But you had to do the entire thing just to get to that state exam.
The same,
again.
yeah.
But you did pretty good on the second one.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was very close. The first time I'd failed, you could only fail 3 sections, or you only failed 2 sections, and the third one, if you failed it, you're out. And I'd missed it by 1 point. So it was a slap in the face, and that's why I thought, well, maybe I'm not meant to do that. That was kind of the moment. I was like, maybe I'm not meant to do this.
Yeah.
And then I wasn't ready to do it. I was going through a lot in my life at that point in time. I don't think I was mature enough to do it, and I think that was the reason that happened. Because the second time I went around, it was totally different.
How old were you
mindset.
the second time?
The first time I was 20. I was going to be 21 by the end of it, and the second time I was 23, 22.
Mm-hmm.
I waited 1 semester, I believe. I didn't go by. I went the winter months, both times.
Yeah.
So about a year had transpired between not making it the first
Taking
time and going on for it the second time.
So, I mean, when you were there and doing, or after you graduated from BLET, were you sponsored from the sheriff's office?
I was sponsored by Granite Falls.
Granite Falls.
The first time, I think, or the second time the county sponsored me.
So did you already have a job where you thought was going to be lined up,
No.
or you just had to apply?
No, they said we can't guarantee anything. I paid my way. They said this is a possibility. We might have openings coming up soon. We don't know. And they eventually did. They had 4 new positions they added, and I got to fill one of those roles. But no, it wasn't a guarantee either. And in fact, it was up to the last minute that they called, and I kind of was thinking, like, yeah, this isn't really meant to be and all. This is the second time through. Like, I wasn't going to do it a third time. And it was 9 or 10 months past that when I graduated.
Oh, really?
And they called me. It was right at the final. I think it was a year that it was good for your certification.
Yeah.
And then you're done. So it was coming up. Well, it wasn't quite a year. It was September. I graduated.
Boy, that's scary.
It was very scary.
To do it twice
Mm-hmm.
and have to wait
Yeah.
9-10 months, and you've got a year before your certification expires.
Yeah, I was already putting in everywhere else for like other jobs outside of law enforcement because I couldn't afford to leave home.
That is so. I mean, I didn't know that about you, to be honest with you. I didn't know the time frame you had. I don't even know if I realized you went through it twice. But that puts an aspect on the hiring, how difficult it is. I know law enforcement is probably needing new people to go through the career now, but when you look at it from your eyes, where you've done it twice, you've started the application process for a job, and there's quite a lengthy process time. I mean, they look at your background.
Mm-hmm.
2, they have to have a spot open to even start that process. They have to have a reason to hire you. But the background process is somewhat lengthy in cases. And if you're at the 9-month mark from the time of graduating BLET and you only have a year where that certification is good, I guess that gets very stressful.
No, it was ridiculous. Me and the other guy, I actually just talked to him last night. He's getting ready to medically retire. He's got heart issues that have developed, and he's only in his 40s. And he was talking to me about that. And he's like, "You remember we were very close. We were talking about coming in today to talk with you." I was like, "Yeah, man, I don't think we were going to make it like another month because we were both really frustrated." He had just got out of the military. He was working at Kmart. Like he didn't want to work at Kmart. He went from, driving tanks in Afghanistan to, working at Kmart. He was like, "No, I want to get into something else." And no one had called him either. It was very stressful. We just kind of hung out with each other and kept in touch. Like, are you heard anything? No. And it went on for 10 months.
And you're not getting paid from any of the training or the certification that you're holding. I mean, your wife, Stella, which is interviewed with us, before this was talking to me about now it's common when you go into BLET that you're pre-hired basically.
Oh yeah.
And you're getting paid to go through it. And that's like, if my situation was different when I did it, I mean, that would just been such a relief to know that your efforts aren't in futile.
Yeah, I think you had to really want it at
Yeah.
a certain point. Now I've seen the flip flop. It happened, 6-7 years ago. It wasn't long after I had got into law enforcement where I started seeing them offering, to pay your way through. And I'm like, wow, that's unfair. Like I've spent all this money. I've racked up credit card debt. Like I had a bunch of credit card debt when I got there because I had no other way. I couldn't think of any other way to get the money up.
Yeah.
And I couldn't put that on my parents. They didn't have a lot of money. My dad was the only one working. My mom was unable to work, so I wasn't going to put that on them. I was still living at home. I tried to move out at one point, and then when I lost my job, I had to move back in with them.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, wow, that's nice for them.
Yeah. So when you graduated, you got hired at Caldwell. Right? That was the first agency, and well, I guess the only agency,
the only one I've been at,
the only one you've been with. And so when you got on the road, there was, I guess there was 3 field training officers.
Mm-hmm.
I was one of them. At that point, I think you were my second trainee, and that seems insane to me. How long? Because of how many I had. It still makes me feel older and older every time I think about that. But it was in a place where you rode a couple of weeks with one field training officer, and then you went to a second and then a third, and it's still, I guess, the way the things are still done today, I'm assuming. Yeah. And what was, when you carried all your info from BLET into the first couple of weeks on the road, how did you feel? When you got on the road and you were with the FTO, did it just all hit you at once? It wasn't
overwhelming.
Overwhelming.
Yeah, it was. And I remember, I told you before we started this, that the 2 weeks of remedial I had, we didn't have a whole lot of money. We weren't like poor by any means, but we didn't have a whole lot. We didn't travel a whole lot. We went to camp meetings and what. So I didn't know my way around the county. Like I'd never had any reason to go up in like 268 and Caldwell, and I didn't even know they existed. Mm-hmm. So whenever I would get in the car, especially with the other FTOs that had no GPS in there and they just blocked the GPS out, I was like, good luck, find it. Like it's on the map. You're gonna have to figure it out. And that has come in handy. I don't know how many times when a GPS wasn't usable or didn't work where we're at. At the time, it was extremely frustrating because I thought there's no way. Like I'm at the time I was 23 and I was like, well, we got GPS and phones and everything else. I'm going to be able to use that anywhere. I had no idea how remote some of the locations were.
Yeah.
And it was overwhelming, just the amount of information, the diversity of people that I was going to deal with as far as the age range. And I watched Earl's interview, and it was the same way the point you brought up about I have to talk to people who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and I have no idea. I wasn't married at the time.
Yeah.
Like I have no idea how to relate to you on that. They ask you, do you have kids? Are you married? Like, do you understand, right? Like, nope. Sorry, man. I only know what's like illegal and what's not. So, and this is wrong. So we got to stop doing this. Well, how can you tell me that? It was always I felt always against the wall or like out of place. So it was extremely overwhelming.
So communication, probably the hardest part in the very beginning.
Oh, learning the lingo, like how to talk to people. That was very hard.
I've always said if you've got the gift of gab, you will excel in the early stages because it just gets easier. Yeah. But in the beginning, that's a tough.
And I don't know if you remembered when I first started, I was very quiet and
a little bit.
Like didn't want to talk, didn't want to come in my shell. Yeah. It was a rude awakening for me, like the change that occurred within just a year. Mm-hmm. And then I had to dial it way back down because I went from, I think Earl had said it better, like about the robot, like this is what we're going to do, and I'm going to make you do it, kind of thing, to try to get more sugar, than being rude or
catch more bees with sugar.
Yeah,
that's for sure. or flies, whatever the saying is.
Yeah, I was going to butcher it, so I didn't continue with it.
It is. It's odd because I've got to see you develop as an officer probably more than anybody else, because really you're one of the senior guys there at the office now, as far as on patrol.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because I remember what you're saying. You know, you were a little bit timid in the very beginning to where you were at now. It's gratifying to me to see somebody stay in, and if you stay in law enforcement, then you're doing something correct somewhere. So it's gratifying to me to see you still in it and excelling into the field. So when you actually got out of field training and got a car, where did you feel field training could have helped more, or basic law enforcement training? What do you think could be better to prepare somebody?
I think if you're going to do this job and you have any interest in doing it, then you need to get up with wherever you're wanting to work and do ride-alongs. Like, that's where it's kind of like being a bricklayer, and you watch videos on how to do it in manuals, and then you actually have to mix mortar and put down a block and do all that. Like, if you've never done that and been hands-on, or like sit in the car, it's different.
Right.
Like, we did all the scenarios and everything in BLET and the domestic violence scenarios, but it was different sitting in the car wearing body armor and listening to you being dispatched to a call. And it was like, oh, this is real. Like, there's people fighting, and I have to go figure out how to stop them from fighting. I might have to intervene. I might not. I might be able to talk to them. I might not. It felt like a roll of the dice. Everything was a roll of the dice. And you can't get that feeling until you're actually sitting in the car. So I think that during BLET, you should have a minimum doing a ride along, and doing it on day shift and night shift, because there's different policing on day shift versus
It's
night shift.
completely different.
Completely, totally different.
I think that's important because I've trained people that the first time they've sat in a law enforcement vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, for when?
No, I don't need any of that. Is the first time they've sat into a law enforcement vehicle, period, was they were hired wearing a badge and uniform and had a gun. And that was the first time they'd ever sat in a law enforcement vehicle.
Yeah, that was my first time. It
Yeah.
was overwhelming.
And that, to me, is somewhat strange, because I've had several different jobs in my career, different professions, and I kind of knew what I was getting into, and I thought I did with law enforcement too, but it was very evident early on that I did not understand the entire concept of what law enforcement does, what they're responsible for, what they're relied on to do, that I had no clue. And so I agree with you. I think ride-alongs is very important. I know a lot of officers, especially ones that have been there a long time, the last thing they want to hear is when they check on duty is, come to the office, you got to ride along tonight as an assignment.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes you don't know what you're going to get. You could get somebody that absolutely talks your ear off from the first minute to the last minute, and then you could have somebody that says nothing. And you're just doing whatever typical assignments you're going to get that night. And it could be a volley of things. It could be a slow night. It could be one of the most busiest nights of the year. But that's the only way to know, is just to do ride-alongs. And I don't think enough are done. And two, I think, this is just my opinion, it's not reflecting of any agency, I think it needs to be prioritize people that are potential candidates for a job versus people that just have an interest.
Oh, yeah.
So, but that's just my take.
No, it would have helped. It would have definitely helped if I would, like, when my dad started, that was the coolest thing ever, is when he when I got out and on my own for a little while, and he's like, "You think I can come ride?" And it was weird. So me and Dad didn't hang out a lot until I got in this job. And then you remember on the shift, he was there like every weekend.
Right.
Like every Friday. Our number was, the time was 135, and he was 135 and a half. He was there
that.
every weekend. It was cool. I got to spend time with my dad, and he got to see what was going on, what the job was like. And he said, "Man, I really wish I would have done this. This is awesome. I love this job. Like, this is cool." I was like, "Yeah, it kind of gets old after a while, Dad." But and you know, he didn't see that. He just saw all the fun stuff.
Yeah.
And he said, he's like, I didn't think that you were going to be interested in this and you were going to go as far as you have. But I'm super glad that we've gotten to spend. So it's been a positive thing all the way around because I got to spend more time with him. But he didn't realize how much stuff goes on in the county he lived. And he'd been doing volunteer work for
Fire.
You know, for fire, hearing the same radio traffic, but he doesn't hear it
Yeah.
all the time. He doesn't hear our side of the radio. So when he started seeing it, it was bizarre to him, the amount of stuff. So that's something to be said. If he doesn't know, and others like him that are listening to one channel, like, what if people that never listen, like they have no idea what goes on around them?
How much to what we did on patrol made the news?
Oh yeah, very little, very
Nothing.
little to nothing. Yeah.
And it could be significant things that's happening in the county.
Mm-hmm.
It takes something astronomical to make news now.
Oh yeah.
And I think just because the population may not hear of any newsworthy items from whatever their sources are getting their news from, that is the county or whatever agency you're interested in is not having much activity. And that's not the case. I find it that they report on maybe 2%
Yeah.
of what we actually do daily. So it's I think there's a little bit of a misconception from the public's view as to how stressed law enforcement or first responders in general are as far as call volume. I remember having a couple of nights where it was New Year's Eve.
Mm-hmm.
Our shift averaged like between 20 or 23 calls per officer in a 12-hour shift.
Mm-hmm.
And that is hard to keep up with.
4th of July.
Yeah, 4th
Fourth of July was insane. And then what was even better than that, is I told my buddy, the same guy that come visited last night, he works in the Asheville area, and I said that number, right? I said 23 or 30 calls. I think in July we had like 28 calls, an officer with all the firework calls and the noise complaints. And he said we had that by 9:30 at his agency there, and the bigger one. So we even like the bigger agencies that have more call volume, more officers, sometimes they can even go to more than that. Like, that blew my mind. Like, ours, it takes us, 20, 30 minutes sometimes to get to a call, depending on where we're at in the county.
Yeah, it depends on how big your jurisdiction is.
And they were in a lot smaller area, so they were just boom, 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 call to call. He said we answered like 40 or 50 that night. I was like, geez, I can't imagine. It's impossible for us to do 40 or 50 driving 20, 30 minutes unless they were, like, down the street. So, yeah, I can't imagine dealing with 50 different ones. It's everywhere.
Yeah. And that's one thing. It's, cities have their own jurisdictions for the most part. But a county, typically, it depends what county you're in, but I can speak from ours, and some of the surrounding ones around us is very similar in size as far as shift size. You cover somewhere around 400 square miles.
Mm-hmm.
And you usually got between 6 to 8 people that's doing it. And that's logistically
it can be a nightmare when it goes wrong.
Yes. Especially if you've got 8 guys on a shift and 4 are on a call.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a domestic where you send 2 of the 4 left to go to a domestic. Then you have 2 other hot calls happen, and there's only 2 officers left that's available. And they may be going, a distance of 40 miles in opposite directions of each other.
Oh, yeah. And I'd take that a step further too. Is I tell people a lot when they ask how many people do you have working, and I was like, well, you got 8. I was like, well, that's plenty. I was like, okay, where do you work? Now tell me, how many times do you have every employee at work? They don't have vacation, sick time, family events. So even though you may have like 8, you really might have 6 or 7, because at any point in time, usually one person a month has some kind of arrangement or vacation,
baby leave. Yes,
yeah,
it could be
training,
multitude of. Yeah, that's an excellent point. Is training,
mm-hmm.
because sometimes training's not conducted locally. You have to go to Edneyville or Salemburg.
I spent 2 months for K9 and at the coast.
Right. And this is just speaking of North Carolina, if anybody's not familiar, but it's similar to other states. So if you do have to go out of your jurisdiction for training, usually that's going to be a week-long course. Mm-hmm. That's typical. It could be a half a week, but the typical times are about a week. Some of them 2 weeks. And like, how long was K9?
2 months.
2 months. Yep. So, I mean, for that one period of time when you were gone, that entire shift was down.
Yeah.
A player. I mean,
I know we just had the recent hurricane stuff, so this is during that time. There was also another hurricane that I had to come home for it because they needed everybody there, and we told the instructors what was going on, and they was like, "Well, we're shutting down anyway because of the hurricane." So I took my new dog home and came back. Yeah, that's a weird class. I don't think there's not a lot of classes that last that long, so it was weird for me. The other classes I'd been to had been a week, couple of days, and that one was 2 months. But you got a lot of bonding and stuff to do with the dog, and a lot of you're getting trained. The dog's already trained. Mm-hmm. You're showing up and learning what to do. And that was hard to get over.
Yeah. So eventually, you did get into K9 work.
Yeah.
And what was? Well, first of all, what is the most gratifying thing about working with a dog?
I think the first moment that I realized that was when he's not, I'll go ahead and preface this, that he's not a dual purpose, which is a bite dog, aggressive, apprehension dog. He's a single purpose dog. He's a yellow lab. His name's Pancho. The first time the gratification really came for me was when I was sitting in a parking lot and I was exhausted. I'd gone and checked a suspicious vehicle or something. He had just left. I checked the guy for warrants. He didn't have any warrants. He was, had run a dog on the car. The other officer had left. Well, he had dropped somebody off with a warrant that we didn't see, and they had left the parking lot. I'm calling my wife or something. I'm maybe not being as vigilant as I should have been, and he starts going ballistic behind me, and I'd never heard it before. So when I look in my mirror, I realize there's somebody walking out of the woods, and I don't know how he sees it. I had his window rolled down, so I guess he smelled the guy coming. And ended up having a warrant, ended up taking him to jail. But I was by myself. It was just me and the dog. So the dude told me, the dog alerted me. And I don't think the guy would have done any harm. But I don't know. You don't know.
Yeah,
he's capable of what he's going to do. What you never know. When that happened, I told my buddy that had just left, that was my partner. He was like, "Oh, you better be glad you had that dog, dude. That's so cool that you just have somebody watching your back." And that's when it dawned on me, like, this dog is me, we're a team, mm-hmm. and we don't have double in our county, so you're by yourself a lot, and it's just me and him for 12-hour shifts. And to know that he was watching out for me was weird. Like, it was just really cool, and it was super gratifying. Like finding the dope and finding lost people and everything, it has their own, but that right there was the moment that I was super excited to be a part of it, and I'm glad I got to do it.
How long did it take to actually get a working bond developed between you and your dog?
It was pretty quick for me. Other people I've watched kind of struggle, but Pancho is like a nut job. Like you've met him. Like, he bond with pretty much anybody, but he really did bond with me. They do something in some of the kennels where, like, crate starving before you get them. They don't feed them for a few days, so that when they meet you, you give them food, and it's immediate. And I remember hearing that, and I didn't know they did it, and I immediately felt terrible because I'm an animal lover, and got him a cheeseburger, and we were best bros after that. They just immediately
Whole cheeseburger?
Oh, yeah, whole cheeseburger. Like they said, don't feed him a cheeseburger. Like I don't care. Like he hasn't had any food in like 2 days.
Yeah, that's pretty rough.
And they hadn't given food or water to it just to make him like panicking or whatever. I don't know the whole. I kind of do, but yeah, I thought that was terrible. So I went and got him that and played with him, just treated him like a dog for a little bit, and we were super tight after that, and stayed that way the entire training. He was a little bit of a knothead. They all are when they're young, but I didn't have any issues with that. I have no complaints, and I tell people that I got super lucky as far as what kind of dog I got, because I've heard horror stories. It's like I have to, my dog doesn't listen to me, doesn't do anything I tell him to do. Like it's a constant battle. Like it's just different natures of different dogs.
Dogs bite their handler.
Oh yeah, we can call it changing teams.
Yeah,
and it's also something important that we don't do is train for them to bite other officers, because again, it's a game. I'll preface that too. All of this is a game to them. Everything is reward and punishment. So it's just like telling a child, don't touch the stove, it's hot, and then they touch the stove and they get burnt. Like, you shouldn't have touched the stove, I told you. Well, with the dog, they've got the pinch collar or the e-collars or whatever. And while you're training with them, you're wanting to instill in them immediately, don't do this and do this. So whenever they get their toy, they could care less. They don't know they found $1 million worth of dope or they found $5, in crumbs in the floorboard. They don't care. They just want you to give them a toy, give them a scratch behind the ear, and keep riding around.
Yeah,
that's all they care about. But yeah, I can tell when he feeds off of me if I'm real nervous. Like if we had a narcotics, like this has to happen. This is a big deal. This is a big bust or whatever. They kind of preface it with "Don't screw it up." Make sure you're here and you're on time in this location for us to use your dog. He could feed off of me when I was nervous. Because we were pretty close, and the older he got, the worse it got between the two of us. Like I knew when he was not having a good day, and he knew when I wasn't. So
yeah,
it's different than any other job in patrol, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
So Pancho is strictly a search dog.
Yeah, he's single purpose.
And just describe a little bit the differences between a bite dog and a search dog, and why there's actually a desire to have one or the other or both.
So I think a lot of it stems from liability. I feel like that they decide, and new handlers. And in our case, our agency we did have handlers prior to us, like my group, but there hadn't been in like 8 years or something. So they went with single purpose to kind of break the ice again and get people not used to having a dog. So single purpose is trained in narcotics detection, articles, track and trailing. And track and trailing makes somebody lost in the woods. It is not someone who is aggressive. We don't send a single purpose dog after someone who is aggressive or armed or, otherwise dangerous. A lot of times where I was used was elderly, dementia patients, small children, scenarios like that, or somebody that jumping around and they thought that they weren't armed, but you never knew that. So
Right.
Obviously they don't use a lot. Now the dual purpose dogs are trained in everything that a single purpose dog is, plus apprehension and recall. And there's different muzzle training where they have a muzzle and they punch instead of bite. Some agencies prefer that they don't bite, and they would rather them have the lead strap. It's a muzzle. We've just switched over to our first dual purpose dogs are starting to come in. We've had one or two for a little over a year now on the road, and I think it's fantastic. We were talking a little bit before about making sure that some people treat them like a tool and some people treat them like a dog. And I've always been the latter, like treat them like a dog. They're a dog first. Like they have no idea what they're doing. They know what they're supposed to be doing, and you're their whole world. So if you mistreat them, or they can feel that. 100% you can tell. I've always seen the dogs that are treated like a tool versus the dogs that love their handler and give their life for you and your shift. Like you can see the difference. And I'm not saying the other one wouldn't, but that's just always been my thought process of like, take care of them, they take care of you.
Yeah.
And then he has.
I've always looked at them as just like another officer.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's not a human, but it's something about after working with one, and I never was a canine handler, but I've been around tons of dogs, a lot of them, and you start looking at them as that's one of us.
Mm-hmm. Well, every shift I've been on, they were like, "Get it? Can I get him out and pet him a little bit, play with him?" I was like, and him being a single purpose dog, that's fine. He's been like a little mascot too.
Yeah.
Like he's kind of famous amongst them. Like Pancho did this, or they'll have a story about Pancho about something, silly he did with him or whatever. So it's been a morale boost too.
Yeah.
And it's something positive. Like you never know, in the middle of the night you have like a terrible, horrible call or whatever, and you get Pancho out, and he starts flopping around on his back or something and acting a fool. Like it mattered. Like he was part of the group, and we'd pet him, and it would kind of uplift everybody. So he's definitely affected me and several officers.
So he's trained not just for searching for narcotics, but also for people.
Yes.
And that could be somebody that's lost or has Alzheimer's or dementia that has wandered away from home, or a lost child even that has wandered away, which happens more than you think.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I think a lot of people, when they see K9 on the car, they think, well, that's interdiction. And a lot of times it's way more than interdiction.
Oh, yeah.
I think the utilization of K9 I think it comes to me more about the dementia or Alzheimer's patient that's walked away from home. That a caretaker has just turned their back for a few minutes and somebody's gotten out of the living room and just walked out the back door into a very dense section of
forest.
Woods. Yeah. Yes. That has been difficult. That happens way more than you think.
At least 2 or 3 times a year where it's severe enough where we don't find them for a while.
Yeah.
We eventually, haven't had one in a while. I don't think we hadn't found them, but
yeah.
every time it's stressful. And having the dog there does bring we got somewhere to start.
And don't know this for sure, but there's drone technology you have access to now.
Yep, and that's been really, really good in aiding us, because sometimes a dog's a dog. They get in the woods and you didn't really have a good location, because some people say, oh, they went that way. Like, well, that way is massive. Like, I need a little more specific. I need a little something, article of clothing, something. And that's what I always train my dog on. The drone can kind of give you a bird's eye of heat signatures that are false, like rocks, whatever.
So
it's a tool.
Thermal too.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's all. The only downside of that is, like I said, the rocks. Anything that soaks up heat during the daylight, and they'll start whispering to you. And that's another issue is having a dog. They drill into your head, trust your dog. Your dog's right and you're wrong all the time. Like you will battle that your entire career as being a canine handler. Is like, oh, I think he needs to go this way. The dog is going to take the path of least resistance. He's no different than me and you. If he sees a thick, forest full of thorns and what, he's not going to want to go through that. It hurts him. So he's going to go around it. Even though that person might have run right through it, he's going to go around it to the easiest spot where the odor is. So that gets super frustrating with other officers who saw the guy run. They're like, no, he went this way. Why is that dumb dog going? Like, they get mad because they want to find the guy. And I have to explain to him, like, look, dude, and I subscribe to this guy on the internet that says it best. I'm the dummy or the idiot at the end of the lead. Like, that's all I'm doing is like looking at him and reading his body language. Like, this is what he's telling me to do, and he's this way or he's not. Yeah. And it's the same way when I tell him about if there's an odor of narcotics in a car. I'm like, yep, he says there's an odor, and it's up to us to find it. Like, it's not meaning that we're going to find it. So that was really hard to get over. Is my knowledge before. Like tearing through a car, like, I know there's got to be dope in here or whatever, and the dog indicates in a totally different spot. The dog's always right. I haven't had maybe a handful of times where it was explainable, but that he was wrong entirely, or you would say he's wrong, and I just wasn't paying attention. It happened a lot during training, during research. In my earlier years, I remember one specific incident, a guy that had like 4 or 5 different canines. The dope was hidden. One of the things they do is put a little magnetic box with some either fake dope or real dope inside the bumper of a car, which is a popular thing to do amongst people on the road that we deal with. Is they'll put a hide. So they had hidden it at a bumper, and I wasn't paying attention. I was so nervous to qualify. It's like my first qualification or second qualification I had with him, that I wasn't watching him and how he was behaving, because they'll have what they call in, on the stand terms, a noticeable behavior change, and it's wild. The dog will actually freeze up, stop. That's what my dog does. Others do different things, but he'll stop and freeze up and point, and just like his breathing, everything. It's noticeable, and the common person watching it that has no experience at all will be like, "Why is that dog pointing at that?" That's what they want to see, and that's what I wanted to keep in my dog. I was so nervous about it that I kept trying to pull him away from the bumper, and he fought me. And that's a good thing. That's a good sign. It's like he's on it. I'm wrong. He's right. And I think if anybody else was interested in canine handling and wanted to get into it, remember that throughout your entire career is you're just the one that's the interpreter. You're doing nothing else but watching that dog's behavior and making sure that he's safe and you're safe. And that's it. Like, he's the superhero. You're the guy that just transported in there. You're the chauffeur.
And their nose are so accurate that they can
extraordinarily, yeah. They
can sense where drugs have been, even though they've been removed.
Yeah. So that's one thing that I would get a lot. Whenever we stop a car and somebody calls for canine, I've heard this 1,000 times. It's like, that dog's full of it. There's no way. There's nothing in my car. Like, you're not going to find anything in the car. I was like, I'll tell them, you're right. It might not. And they'll look at me funny. And I say, he is indicated to the odor of narcotics. Like, at some point in time, narcotics was in this vehicle or close to it or something. Like, something has been left in this vehicle. Mm-hmm. And almost every single time, except for the most hardened, like, they've done this a bunch. They're like, well, yeah, such and such smoked marijuana in here 2 or 3 days ago or whatever, had some pills in his pocket. Like, they were prescribed to him. They'll be real quick to tell you.
Is he accurate where he can, like, if somebody just had it in their pocket and was a passenger, will he pick that up?
Oh yeah,
really?
Yeah, I've had multiple times. I think there was one incident where there was a yellow Volkswagen Beetle, and the guy was sitting in the back right passenger seat, and he jumped up on the window, and the window was down. The other windows were all up. And of course, that it could be just because of that, but the guy had in his pocket heroin, Percocet, like a whole bunch of controlled substances in his pocket, in his right pocket, and the dog actually jumped up and smelled at the window and like looked at him and froze up and freaked the dude out. He started, why is this dog staring at me, dude? Like, what is he doing? Get him off the car door. Like, he's freaking out. He thought the dog was going to bite him. I was like, he's not a bite dog. It's okay. Like, but he is indicating on the car. Mm-hmm. And once we got everybody out of the car, there was 4 people in the car, and all 4 of them were patted down, and he's the one that had the dope. Yeah, he's very, and something else is when you put the dog in the vehicle, they can pinpoint. So once they get the free air sniff, is what it's called, around the vehicle the first time, that can also give you the option to go inside the vehicle, and you put the dog inside for a more detailed search. So right. He can do the same thing. You'll look for the same behavior changes that you saw outside of the car. You'll look for inside of the car with him. I put it in my reports, always ceasing all movement and changing his breathing, slowing to almost ceasing breathing, like just staring. And that's how I know he's pointing with his nose the only way he can for me, right, at where the odor is the strongest. So, and that's it. And all he wants is his Kong. And as soon as I throw him the Kong, he's out of there. He could care less about the whole process. It's crazy to watch, like how many thousands and over $1 million worth of dope that he's obtained.
Has it really?
Yeah. We since his retirement, we kind of have been going through all the news articles to find out, what his numbers were. And I'm sorry to say that I didn't keep up with it as best I should have, but my wife did a fantastic job with it. And the amount of dope he sees was just crazy. Mm-hmm. Like, I didn't realize it at the time because it all goes by quickly. Yeah. And we were talking about that before. Like, any young officers coming up, take pictures and like be proud of your time doing this job, because you'll look back and wish you had taken a lot more.
Oh yeah, yeah. I wasn't a picture taker, and I regret that now. I think everything just goes by so quick during your career, unless you really stop to take time to think about that. Mm-hmm. Then, and I wasn't that kind of guy. I just went to the next thing, and then I was worried about the next thing after that. But that's something I regret. I wish I'd slowed down just a little bit, maybe documented a little bit of my experiences better.
Oh, yeah.
For my personal reasons, and then definitely take more photographs.
Yeah, and it's so wild that each individual, for me, it's been each individual officer can be working at the exact same place and have a totally different career.
Mm-hmm.
It is very much an individualistic line of work, and everybody has a different viewpoint on it.
Yeah.
So you might go 30 years and not be involved in a shooting, and I know people who I've not been directly. I've been in off and on with something along those lines, but I've never had to take someone's life, and I'm very thankful for that. But it's always in the back of my mind as not a question of if, it's when, and that's hard to deal with too. But the amount of people that I've worked with and you've worked with that have been there no longer than 2 or 3 years that have been in a shooting, and you're like, man, I've been rolling the dice for years.
Yeah.
And it's so wild how somebody's career can be entirely different. Like somebody brand new out of BLET can just stumble upon something like that.
Caldwell is, I think it's an abnormality. I mean, I don't even know if that's a word. It's not normal.
Yeah, abnormality. Yeah,
Abnormality.
Yeah.
That's right. It's just, in that sense, it seems like there's a lot of violence in Caldwell. When officers get there, it continues, and it translates over to the officers. I don't understand that part. And somebody said this to me. It made sense that because we're so dialed into the ongoings of what happens in Caldwell, we know everything that happens. To where if maybe Gastonia, maybe Charlotte Meck or Onslow County or wherever, maybe they have the same thing, and we just don't hear it because, like we talked about earlier, the news doesn't report.
No.
But maybe like 2% of what we do, and it's usually negative if it is.
Oh yeah.
But I don't know if Caldwell is just in a category on its own, and that's an oddity, or if it's happening everywhere like we know it to be, and we just don't know about that.
Well, if you've been to training outside of our agency too, where I've heard people, like locally and the surrounding of Caldwell,
They're like,
oh,
you're from Caldwell?
Yeah, that's exactly the same look that I get. Yeah, you're from Caldwell? Like, oh my God. Like, yeah. And they ask me what kind of cool stories I got. Like, I don't know. It's not been me. Like, I've been very fortunate, and I know a lot of officers have been very fortunate, and it's so surprising, like the amount of times where it's been so close. And they've changed their mind at the last minute, and you've been able to breathe again.
Yes. We sat down and we talked. I was with a couple of guys, and we were actually naming all the jurisdictions inside of the county, plus the surrounding counties around Caldwell. And I think we came up with 32 names that had either been shot or either lost their lives in the line of duty. 32 names in a 10-year period.
Oh yeah,
it's insane
for being like a rural. No one really knows. Like, if you're not from around here, I tell them where you're at. I usually use the same terminology that you do. It's like, oh, we're just a little ways from ASU.
Right.
I guess most people know where that is, or Charlotte.
Yeah.
But yeah, no one really knows where that place is. But man, it's hopping.
Yeah. So you're in a unique perspective of having a wife inside of law enforcement.
Oh yeah.
Where does that concerns?
So the first time that was really tested was, and I didn't ask her what she was going to discuss with you, so I don't know if she discussed any of it, but her shooting that she was in, that was the first time where it was really tested. When we first met and decided that this was probably going to be serious between the two of us, we were passing each other in the driveway for a year and a half. We were on opposite rotations. So we would have to take days off to go on dates.
This was okay, while you had a relationship, she was on.
She was on the road, and I was on the road, and we were trying to, just go be a couple.
And your shifts were mismatched.
Yeah.
So if you're on day shift, she was on night shift.
On the opposite day, even.
And
so,
you were working on the days she was off, and vice versa. When she was working, you were off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. It was wild, and I don't know how we pulled it off, but we would always manage to have one day a week, or we would try to the overlap, or we would either take off, and that's why I eventually asked to leave the shift I was on and move to another rotation. But yeah, the same, she works with a group of men, primarily male dominated. So a lot of people ask me that question first, don't you get frustrated she's working with a whole bunch of men? Not really. I trust her to do her job and be professional, and she's got to make her place. She has a harder job. I wouldn't want to be female in this career because I've worked with her. When she's called me to go out in the county to do something, obviously she's going to see if I'm working. I can come back her up because I'm invested in her safety. I'll show up, and the way they speak to her, I got to remember that I'm wearing a badge, and then I can't be husband. I got to be deputy, because some people are different. Some people have a lot of respect for a female officer, and then others are entirely different. I'm not even going to speak with you. I'm going to talk with that man over there, and it just rubs you the wrong way. There's been a lot of times where she's done UC or undercover work where I don't really want her to do it because I'm husband, but it's her job.
Right.
And it's the same way whenever I've had to go do something that she doesn't really necessarily want me to do. It's the same back and forth, and it's a constant roller coaster for both of us. And we've made it work over the years, but it's definitely not. We were told the divorce rate in law enforcement was absolutely every bit of half, and we decided to do the even worse thing, and both of us are police in the same house. We actually were told at one point in time, we thought we couldn't have a child, that they frowned upon us adopting a child because both of us were in law enforcement, and it was an unstable household is what they called
So that
me.
was the people, the adoption agency, frowned on it because
Yep.
you're both law.
Yeah, they told us it was an unstable household because of the amount of stress with just one person. And she looked at me when I told her that both of us were in it, and she was like, "Oh no," she's like, "I can go ahead and tell you that you might want to look elsewhere." Because
Are
I
you
think,
serious?
yes, sir. Yep. So that was a blow. We had been trying to have a kid for 3 years, and that was one of the final straws with me. Is I'm just going to pray about it and leave it alone because it's not going to happen. And so there's been ups and downs with it, definitely, and the downs are rough because that's your spouse and they're doing the exact same. There is a whole lot of positives to it though, as far as whenever I come home, I hear a lot of law enforcement that is much older than me that don't want to talk to their spouse about what they went through at work, where I can do it easily. I can go to her and be like, such and such was in a shooting today, whenever Cheryl got shot, I was able to go in and talk to her because they had all his gear strewn out across the tables, blood on it and stuff. I was able to talk to her about how that affected me, and she understood it. She understood that this was somebody I work with, and she knew him. So there's a whole lot of positives as far as de-stressing that go along with it, but there's also a whole lot of negatives. I would say that I've enjoyed the positives more than the negatives.
Is there a worry factor about when she walks out of the door?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially when she's doing the undercover stuff. I can't ask. I don't ask the questions. I usually know a little bit, just enough to make me more worried about what's getting ready to happen. But I just have to. I trust in her abilities that she's going to be able to handle herself, and I trust the men and women that she works with. They're going to take care of her just like I would anybody else on my shift, and that's the brotherhood and the bond I think that this job has that any other job I've had hasn't. So I think that's something that really helps me get over the worry about when she goes to work every day. And a lot of it helped. I noticed a big difference in her personally whenever she got off the road and into the detective division. there was a little bit more of a calming down, like the different stages of alertness, the yellow and the orange and the red and the black, like you're just out of it. And a lot of us tend to stay in the orange or the red, even some of us. And I just watched it like a volume knob being turned down with her over a course of maybe a year, and it was great because both of us were, way up here. And then when one of us got off the road, and I thought, man, what if I got off the road too? Like, we wouldn't have anything to argue about at all.
So I'll tell you, I think it'll be December 24th will make me 6 years off the road, and I have been in a perpetual state of yellow.
Mm-hmm.
It's never went away.
No, it doesn't go away.
And for people that might not know what we're talking about when we're talking about these colors, is like it's the state of awareness you are, like how you're observing people that's around you, where you sit in a restaurant, is your back toward against a door,
and we argue over that because both of us are in law enforcement.
Right.
That's another thing.
It's some people think of it as being paranoid, but it's really like a state of level. You never want to be black because you're dead. And when I say black, it's like that's the color code. You go, what is it? White, yellow, orange.
Yeah,
red.
white. You're like clueless, like you have no idea what's going on around you.
Yes.
Yellow and orange, and
so I mean, it's like when you get to you don't want to stay at an elevated like red, which is an elevated state.
An active threat is happening like right now.
Yes, you don't want to conduct business in red, but you never want to get so lackadaisical or oblivious to your surroundings that you end up being in what they call a shade of black, and because that can cost you your life.
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about. But to me, I never come out of yellow.
Mm-mm.
Like even when I was in duty, I think I was yellow, and then when you start going to a call, you start going more toward that orange.
Mm-hmm.
And then if the call's bad, you're in red.
Yeah.
But I thought when I got out that yellow would just,
No.
I'd be neutral. And it doesn't.
Now that's something that when you sign up to do this, I think that is something you should understand and accept, is that you will never see the world the same way you did when you came into it. And I'm on the one hand grateful for that, and then at times, when it's Christmas at my family's house and I'm still looking for somebody to break down the door.
Yeah.
When I'm like, man, I wish I could just sit here and chill and not be worried about this. But sometimes something will trigger a loud noise or whatever. It'll trigger a memory. And you're like, I'm just sitting here like grandma slammed the oven for the turkey and you heard a loud noise. You're like, I remember that one time that dude got like slammed the door in this girl's face or whatever and busted her lip. Or it's like a million and one things. It's a Rolodex will start coming up in your head.
Yeah.
I think that me still currently being here, I think when I'm patrolling, it's at like an orange all the time. And then when I was on baby leave, I stayed there for a while. Mm-hmm. And then towards the end of my baby leave, like I felt normal again. But the yellow, it never went away. And that was the first time I noticed it because I got 10 years in, and that was the first time I'd been off and away from it that long. And even by the end of the 3 months, I didn't notice much of a difference. I noticed a little bit of a difference.
No, I don't know if it goes away.
I don't think it does.
I'm at a point now where if my health issue never turns around and I never step back inside a patrol car again, if that happens, I don't want it to happen, but if it does, I think my state of yellow will continue on forever.
Yeah.
Because it's been 6 years and it's not changed. And
it almost makes you feel guilty to not be in yellow, though. Like when you try to relax it out of it, you feel like, well, I don't want to be oblivious. Like now I know what can happen. I don't want to ever be in that state of mind where I'm not prepared.
Yeah.
That's how it feels like to me. I think that's why we hold on to it.
Yeah. I mean, it's something to be said, I guess. When you join law enforcement, it's more than just a sensation of being part of that. I mean, you believe in what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And I think if you believe that feeling just doesn't go away.
No.
So, I guess it's a cursed blessing.
Hmm?
Sometimes you really want to relax.
Oh yeah,
I remember how I looked at things before I was in law enforcement.
the movies. Like
Well,
any crowded place. Walmart.
I didn't sweat nothing. I went wherever. I didn't think about
Yeah.
what was behind me or
Nah.
look where the exits are in the room.
Mm-mm.
I didn't think about that. Do law enforcement for a bit. You start looking at stuff. You start looking at people's ankles. their
Oh, yeah.
waist, see
Yeah,
if
I'm
they're
looking to
printing.
see any kind of imprint of a weapon,
Yeah.
like everywhere you go, and if I do, and now since we were talking about me and my wife, I'll tell her, like in case she didn't see it, or she'll tell me in case I didn't see something. So it's like doubled. Like especially we go in Walmart and like, hey, walk that way. Like and she just does it, and I do the same thing.
Mhm.
Like I arrested that guy. Well, I'll tell her later, and especially now that I have a kid. Like just go that way for a minute. Like, oh, that guy, me and him had a brawl, and he hates my guts, or that guy knows me and I can't get away from it. He'll talk my ear off. Like the reverse of that. Like, hey, we just need to get our groceries and go home.
Yeah.
And it's doubled because we both live in the county we work.
Yes.
Which I think I would probably change to help a little bit with that.
I was
I think-
fortunate. I lived
Yeah.
in the adjacent county I worked.
Mhm.
But still, it had, I saw people I dealt with in that county, in Caldwell. I saw it, the same people in the county I lived in too, but it had to be much more rare than somebody
Yeah.
that lives inside of the county they work in. So I mean, I swore I'd never go eat at a restaurant in Caldwell.
Yeah. Yeah, we still don't really do that because we eat at a couple of safe ones that
Yeah.
they love us, and we've always eat there when we're not at work.
Yeah.
I think the Mexican restaurant we're talking about, like that everybody eats
Yeah.
at. But other than that, I've had so many bad experiences at different places, not just like the food or anything, nothing to do with the food, just the employees. That maybe there's one, not all of them, but like one that just absolutely hates law enforcement.
That's
And
something
I
you
don't
gotta
want to take
think
my
about.
family in there.
Yeah,
and
it's
eat.
something you got to think about, especially in uniform.
Yeah. Or if they recognize me out of uniform and my family who's done nothing to them,
Yeah.
like they take it out. Like that's one of my worst fears.
Well, there's plenty of good places to eat in Caldwell. We're not
Mhm.
bashing the places, but
No.
there's something you have to think about when you decide to go in that career path.
Yeah, and when they hire people, they have no idea. It's just like anybody, any field. Nobody
Yeah.
knows somebody's personal life, and they may have no clue that person has like 10 outstanding warrants.
Yeah.
The one time we deal with them, and they're working at the drive-through.
Yeah.
Like they don't know.
You never know what's going to be additional toppings on your burger.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The amount of spit I've consumed is astronomical. I'm
Yeah.
sure that I don't really want to think about.
Yeah. But, well, so you, Stella, your wife, we've talked about that a little bit, and now you have an addition to the family.
Mm-hmm.
And has that had any change on how you look at it?
Oh yeah. I wouldn't say that like I told you earlier, I started when I was 16. The first time I watched anybody pass away or die, that it was live, was when I was 16 in a car wreck. And that has continued the rest of my life. I've had a uniform of some kind since then, of those two jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's always hard to deal with a child or a toddler or a baby. And I heard a bunch of parents tell me that were in law enforcement, it's like, oh, wait till you have a kid. It gets way worse. And I just kind of blew it off as, they're just saying that. There's no way it can be worse. It already sucks. Yeah. Whenever I found out she was pregnant, and within her pregnancy, I had 2 infant fatalities, and she had an infant fatality. And hers required an autopsy. And it's just terrible. Like it doubled the amount of grief that you feel that you can't show when you're there. I think that it made me, and I was going to say this in the beginning, law enforcement as a whole has made me love people that I care about a whole lot deeper than I normally would have.
Yep.
Because I tell my rookies, it sounds morbid what I'm about to say, but I tell them there's a Latin phrase I can't remember, but basically remember death, or like keep death in your head at all times. And I tell them that my mentality when I go to work every day is that I'm not going to make it home today. Like is my life squared away enough with all my family, my kids, my wife, my father, my mother, my sister. Is it squared away and they know that I care about them enough where I can leave today and they know that I care about them and that I didn't leave anything bad behind. And if I keep living like that every day and not look at it as a morbid, like negative thing, look at it as a motivational thing. Like I need to watch what I say. If I maybe had a harsh word, I was getting ready to speak to one of them, keep it to myself. You know, if I live that way and having the baby and the job changed that even more. You know, like I never left the house mad with my wife, and now it's even more so. I don't want to leave with the baby because, you know, she's too little to remember it now. Yeah. But, you know, if something were to happen, I don't want any of them to feel like that I was angry when I left or I was mad. Even if you were in an argument or a fight or whatever, you have to. So, yeah, it's changed. The baby added to what I already felt, which was over the top. And one of the deputies I worked with took that real serious. Like he said, I've never thought of that. And he called his mom that night, talked to her because they had been an argument. And I told him, like, dude, you in this job, you need to accept the fact that is a possibility, and use this as a positive thing, not as a negative thing. Don't go around thinking every day like, oh, today's the day. Like, don't act like that. But think today might be the day. Am I prepared for that? Have I prepared my family? And when I say prepared them, do they know I care? And I've done everything that I can to leave them okay. That this is what I signed up to do and I'm enjoying it. I feel like I was called to do it.
Yep.
And don't feel bad if something does happen. Like that this is where I was supposed to be.
I think that's one thing that law enforcement, it's almost a gift to me, was I started taking things less for granted. I don't think you can ever get out of the way of not taking some things for granted, but I know for a fact it made me look at my own family, whether they're distant or close, and evaluate that. Because of the people that are extremely important to me, I think you need to tell them you love them, you appreciate them, and you're there for them. Because we see enough in the profession of people that don't get an opportunity to come back and do it again.
And it doesn't have to be like us getting hurt. It could be we witness public. Other people, like their despair, and like, you know, I had a here recently, a woman with her husband killed himself right in front of her and her 3 kids. And I will never forget the 3 kids in the front yard with me. Like, he left them, it was unfair. He left them in absolute devastation. And there was nothing I could say. There was no training that I had received to be able to talk her, the mother, which I just had to separate with another officer. And I got the 3 kids into the car, like, who's the oldest of you 3? And the oldest one spoke up and was like, can you be a big girl and take care of your sisters right now? Do you guys need any water or anything? I know what you've seen is traumatic. I can't help you right now. I need to make sure that the scene is okay, but I'm going to check on you guys first. And the calmer I was with her. But, yeah, we see so much of that kind of scenario every day. Yeah. It's impossible for you to come home and be cold. And if it is, you need to get out. Yeah. It's just not affected you. It's affected me.
Yeah, and the more and more I talk to people about this, that is one thing that I think it's evident. There has to be a time where law enforcement's kind of looked at the same light as veterans for PTSD or any kind of events that could eventually lead to PTSD. I don't know what the answer is there, but I know it has to be when you talk about somebody that's done 10 years, let alone somebody that makes it all the way to retirement. And if they've done, it doesn't matter what position in law enforcement agency you're doing, but let's just say you spent most of your career on patrol.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to see so much that I can't even fathom. I don't even know
a
how
third
to
of the way through
estimate.
it. Yeah, that's crazy that there's 2/3 more of this that I have no idea. It's still rolling dice.
And it may not be that you're shot at directly
Right.
or have to utilize your firearm in a scenario. It's the dealing with seeing somebody's close relative pass away.
Mm-hmm.
It's car crashes. It's overdoses. It's suicides. It's just natural deaths in general.
Yeah.
You see a lot of grief.
You learn death isn't picky.
It's not picky.
Age, sex, race,
It's
nothing.
not. And nobody tells you how to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just something you learn on your own. Some people deal with it a lot better than others.
Mm-hmm.
It can make you cold. That could be a way of dealing with it, is just become cold. And it doesn't matter. Some
Or you
people
give off the perception that it does,
Yep.
that you don't care.
Some people can take it on as a joking matter after they've cleared the call, and it's a joke about it. And I don't know if that's the right way, or I don't know what the right and wrong way really is to deal with it. But you deal with it. You just got to figure out how you come across the best way of dealing with that. No, there's no training. There's nothing in VLET. There's nothing in field training that tells you how to answer that.
No.
It's pretty much you're winging it the first time it
Mm-hmm.
happens, and then you just start developing how you deal with it from there. Worst thing I've ever had to do was as far as dealing with somebody's just, you see a concerned person go to a absolutely mentally destroyed person in the period of 10 seconds. Was this mother had called in a welfare check for her son at his house, and she said his vehicle's there, he should be inside, but he's not coming to the door. So a lot of things happened between there, but eventually I was an officer there with another officer that we both worked with, and we had made entry to the house, and he had taken his own life. And we had not allowed any family to come into the house, but they did not know what we saw. And I had to go out there, and by that time there was the mother, the father, the sister, the wife of the individual, and basically an entire family. And you got to go out there and tell them.
Yeah.
It's just, good Lord, I never thought in a million years that I would have to do something like that.
No.
And you don't know if you're going to do it right or wrong, because there's no training.
No,
for
there
that.
was no, to my knowledge, I don't recall a single time in BLET where we did death notification.
Yeah.
I think the instructors covered it, and they said kind of what we're saying. It's like, you're going to find out that it sucks, and there's no right way of doing it. Like, you can, there's definitely wrong ways to do it, but there's not any way I can tell you. Like, it's case to case. You know, I've had some attack me for telling them that their loved one is deceased. I had a woman one time with her husband was a logger, and he got killed in a logging accident way out of county, and she became violent with the messenger kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. That happens,
and
that's frequent.
I had one guy. It's like, why didn't you just put her in handcuffs? Like, she's already lost her world. Like,
yeah,
you technically could have. Oh, you were assaulted, but why in the world would you even think along that lines? That's the cold thing you're talking about. Like, that was his version of processing the job. Was just like, we'll just put her in handcuffs till she calms down. You know, then I had other people who was like, no, I don't know what I would have done, dude. Like, that's rough. Like, there's a smattering of viewpoints on how to deal with that or how to tell her. And I remember telling a guy that's working now, that's a sergeant. He was kind of buddied up with me. It's funny how that happens. We get out of field training, and officers will pick like one guy that they want to hang out with the most, that's kind of influential to them, or they look up to him.
Right.
And he had chosen me. And I told him before we walked in the door, I said, this is going two ways, brother. She's going to be really, really upset, obviously, either way. And she's either going to start breaking things or trying to hurt you, or she's just going to fall on the floor and collapse.
Yeah.
And I said, or it could be a combination of both. And he was like, well, this is like her cousin or something. Like, she's not like real close family. He's like, surely not. I was like, I said, do you want to talk to her? Like, this was his first time doing this. And he's like, no, I just kind of watch you do it. I was like, okay. And when I told her, that's the first thing she did was grab a plate and smash it and just lose her mind. And it was a distant relative. So, and when he cleared the call, he's like, you're right. Like, how many, and every time I say that, we were talking about the longer you do the job, the more you remember how you were when you began. I started counting like how many times I lost count, how many times you do that type of call. So when they ask you, like, well, how did you know what to do? It's like, I've literally done this like 100 times. And then you think about it, it's like, well, I've done this 100 times. And that's bizarre.
It is. That's the thing is when you sit down one day and you just think about, well, how many notifications have I done? It's a lot.
Yeah.
And they're taxing. I think that was the worst thing for me in the job. It was notifications. I've seen hands-on violence and dealt with people that was violent, but that doesn't compare to notifying a family member that doesn't expect what you're about to tell them.
No, if their kid's drowned in a pool, or like especially if it's a child,
yeah,
and you're telling a father, or especially a father, a mother, yes, but a father's. Like, the first instinct usually has always been with me is violence. Like, just because they can't do anything. They feel like they can't do anything to fix it. I can see it on their face. I can feel their frustration. And I think, yeah, that'd be how I'd react. Like 110%, that's exactly how I'd react. Because I can't fix it.
Yeah.
And you're the one that's got to tell them. And yeah, it's a bizarre thing that no one talks about. As like one of the things we have to do.
See, and that's the thing. We're talking about how could training be better, or what could we do better for training. I think that's a topic. But I don't know how. I mean, how do you do that? How do you do that? How do you?
I think you got to get officers who have. You still can't. You can get their perspective. Like, I can tell you, and you can tell somebody else how you would do it, and then they get in another scenario and they did exactly what you tell them, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
Like, I really think that law enforcement needs more of a, like brake masons or like apprenticeships where they're literally under your tutelage, just like field training, but it needs to almost be a little longer.
Yeah.
Where they're watching you do the calls more than them handling it for you, because I see that a lot. And I took something from our old lieutenant where whenever I'd call him for help, I'm like, hey, LT, I got a question. I've never encountered this before. It's weird. What do I do? And he would always start with, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, well, I kind of want to advise them to go here and then take out this piece of paperwork. He's like, that sounds good. Tell them to do that. So he made me formulate a plan and fix it. And I think we need to do a lot better job of during field training. And I'm not saying my field training was like, this is what my field training was excelled in that, because you guys did that for me and made me think and made me do on my own. And then corrected me if I was wrong, like brought me back. Like, whoa, you're doing something wrong or illegal. I can't do it that way.
I was a big fan of trial and error. And if you were erring too much, I would stop you.
Yeah. And that's the most, unfortunately, like, that sounds weird to people that don't know, but that's the best way to learn it, because it's making you critically think. And the amount of times we have to critically think and do it immediately is every day, every shift. Like, you might not have all the answers, but you better find one.
Yeah.
Or you better figure something out. So I think we desperately need more of that, where you're being observed, you handling the entire, that last phase of field training, to me, almost feels like it needs to be the entirety of field training, and the classroom stuff needs to be more focused in a classroom setting, like learning your RMS and whatever you're using to enter information in. It needs to be in a classroom setting, and the actual talking and dealing with people needs to be observed more. Because I see a lot of officers, like I think you guys were talking about in another interview of, I got somebody riding with me again. I got to field train again. I was going to get them through, and they'll handle a lot of their calls for them. Like, just watch what I do. Yeah. And they do that the entire field training. And then they'll document, look, well, they did a great job on the report. They did a great job handcuffing. But I had to tell them what to do. Like, I showed them how to do every bit of it, and I didn't see them do it.
Right.
And it's a really fine line to walk, like you said, because the trial and error is sometimes frustrating to watch somebody floundering around and not being able to talk to people or not being
Yeah.
able to handcuff or something. Like, oh my God, they just come on and do it, dude.
If it's too excruciating, I would kind of throw the lifeline out there and
Yeah.
fix it. But I know this: if you do work for people, they'll allow you to do the work.
Oh yeah.
And if the person has to do the same job twice, they're most likely to hone their technique, so they only have to do it once the next time.
Mm-hmm.
That's the trial and error part. That's usually effective. But you can't guide them so much where they're not doing most of the work. That's you just can't do the work for them in this job. They have to have immediate experience. But it comes quick in law enforcement.
No, yeah, it's sink or swim is what I describe it.
Absolutely. So it's just, there's a fine line, and you got to be paying attention when to throw that lifeline to know when that new trainee is too far over their head.
Yeah, it's a common sense thing. Like, definitely need to be paying attention. It's like they are OODA loop, but they're stuck. Their needle's stuck in a groove. They're not coming out of it.
So I remember, like, this is getting back to the death notification stuff. I'm trying to think of how confident I felt doing my first unattended death. Because that's not a confident feeling. For me, it was.
No, you're just chilling with a dead body for hours and like, what do I need to be doing?
Yeah.
Like, even though I know what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Like,
It could be something that's natural cause of death, but still there's a whole process of activities you have to do to clear the call and make sure it's done properly. To me, that was stressful in the beginning because it seems like that's one of the more important things you do. You're dealing with somebody that's died.
yeah, their loved one remains.
And the more you do it, the more confident you felt. The call that I never got more confident in doing is the notifications.
Yeah.
It didn't matter how many I did. I felt just as uncomfortable with the last one I did as the first one I did. That one, you just...
No, it's not. Unfortunately, it's not one we do every single day, but I'd say the odds are pretty good for once a month. Every bit of it for each shift, and then that may be across the board or once a week. The agency will call you and like they could be out of Ohio or something. It's like, hey, let them know their family member passed away,
state.
and you don't know if they're going to freak out or if it's somebody they were really close to. Or I've had people slam the door in my face. It's like I don't give a give a crap.
I've had that one too.
All right, I forgot about the third option. That can happen too.
Yeah, that can happen. But I don't know, man. I'm glad to see where you're at in your career. I'm glad to hear you talk about these things now. You just got to keep passing that torch. There might be somebody that's 10 years down the road from now that's talking back to you like you are to me.
This is crazy for me. That's what I talked about when I called you on the phone. Like the people that trained me, and I thought we'd never get back to this point where there was 10 years of experience as an officer, as a deputy. There was 2 and 3 years for a long time there. Like that was the guy that'd been there a while.
Yeah.
And then now all of a sudden, when I started, it was you guys with 20 years, 25 years, 15 years. It was awesome. Like, it kind of felt like a dad thing. Like, I can go talk to Dad and figure out what I'm screwing up, and Dad's going to let me know what I'm screwing up, and I can fix it. And then it got to the point where that wasn't there. I was in that weird in-between phase where I was becoming Dad. And the first time that I realized that I was the one they were asking questions, it was, oh, my God, I felt like I'm an idiot. I shouldn't be answering any questions. And I wonder how many other people feel that way. Like, I know they've asked me to do this, and I can do it, and I will do it, and I'll do it as the best job I can. But I feel like an idiot. Like I don't want to pass that along. And I've been really hard on myself about that. And I have a lot of guys that are 2 years deep into this career now saying like, no, you were the one that shot it straight. Like this is what the job is going to be. Like we really appreciate your input. And you're the one that convinced me to stay. Like some of them wanted to quit. I'm like, man, wait till you hit your 5 years. I'll be honest with you. Like, wait till you hit your 5 years. Like your 5 years when I got real sour. Like I feel like that was my time when I got sour about it, and I started getting complaints. Like I was just being short with people, and I had to adjust that like quick and figure out how to de-stress my own life and get back on track. So I try to be realistic with them And like, guys, it's going to be like a roller coaster. When they said it to you in BLET, they're not lying. They're not filling your head with empty promises. It's going to be a roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
At times it's going to be fantastic. You're like, I get paid to do this. Like, this is a blast. This is cool. And the other times, like, I don't get paid enough to do this. Like, this is ignorant. Like, why am I doing this? Or like the death notification thing, or somebody spits in your face for the first time, or somebody pees on you. You know, you get a bodily fluid on you that was intentionally put there. You know, there's going to be ups and downs. And I mean, me being realistic with them and telling them what it was going to be about and telling them that it was going to be okay. Like the good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, look forward to this because this is coming too. Like, and you're going to love it when you hit this point. And you're going to love it when for me, the satisfaction was like having somebody ride in my car and I was teaching them the craft, the trade.
Yeah.
And like, this is bizarre. I was like, was I really this like shy and backwards and everything else when I was sitting here in this seat? And then it really made me think back to my field training time. And it's a cycle. And I think I'm in the weird part of it now. I'm starting to take the role of more of a supervisor role and watching them, making sure they're okay.
Yeah.
And they have what they need, both knowledge-wise and, you know, gear or whatever. It's weird. It's weird being in those shoes now.
Yeah, and that was just the thing I had to just keep reminding myself is nobody's a natural when they're first coming into law enforcement. Nobody's just a natural, perfect candidate. Everybody's going to struggle somewhere, whether it's either communication with the public or either report writing or if it's hopefully not, but officer safety sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
It's just there's going to be some part that I've never had one that just was perfect right down the middle. Never. So, I mean, that's the thing is you got to take what you got and hone what you can.
Yeah.
Some things you can't. The trainee has to fix. But you got to work with what you can and make the best out of it. And you can't find one thing that is just going to be absolutely critical for that individual not to pass field training unless it's officer safety.
Mm-hmm.
If it's that, then it's just you can't.
Yeah, you're done.
Can't do it. But I mean, it's everything else. You just got to take it all in perspective. I think training is one of the most important things there are for any agency. Is training that new employee. I think you have a small window opportunity to get that guy going or girl going down the right path. And if you don't train them to the best of your ability, they could get swayed and it deter their career eventually. I think it's that important. But
well, every officer watching this can testify to that. Like, we've all worked with somebody, like, who trained them? And you're like, oh, like, I'm going to have to deal with this for the next however many years.
Mm-hmm.
And then who trained them? Oh, man, I can't wait for them to get on our shift. It's going to be fantastic. You get one of the two. Like, I don't ever hear any in between. Like, it's either like, heck yeah, they're coming with a shift. They've been a good. So what you said, I think one of the first times you did one of these podcasts was spot on. Like, it can make or break your entire career.
Yeah, I think it's a small window to
and it's such a short time.
That. And it's just you got to take that opportunity and make what you can out of it. You can't just take advantage of it. It's a small window.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly think that's one of the most important times for a new career is that part of development. But
and it's rough doing field training because you also have not only are you training that individual to do your job, but you also have to answer the person's problem. Like the reason you're out there.
Yeah.
Like if they can't figure it out and your trainee can't figure it out, like you're the guy that's supposed to fix both of those issues. Like I got to make sure that he or she's doing what she's supposed to do, and that I fixed the problem that I was called out here to fix.
Yeah.
So, that being squared away is definitely make or break your entire career, and I think I was. You guys gave me all the tools. Whether or not I used them or not was up to me. Like, and that's what you gotta let. Like, you're just letting them go back into the ocean.
Yeah.
Like I gave you all the tools.
So your wife had kind of queued up a question. I didn't think to ask her this, but she wanted to talk about it. And she said it was going to be a question I should ask you too. And she said, I thought you were going to ask me if my daughter wanted to go in this career, what would I tell her?
Mm.
And she gave an answer. I'll ask you the same thing.
Oh, man. I would say that I would support her in it if she decided to go, because I understand it. I understand if she felt the same urge, because we talked before this, I didn't really have the calling that everybody else talks about. Like, there wasn't a patriotic flag or anything flying that told me, like, hey, you probably need to be in law enforcement. It was just things started lining up. My wife's totally different. She was doing the Explorer program. She wanted to get in this job. So if that is something that she decided to dedicate her life to, because I believe it is, in any public service or military or nursing is a commitment to helping people, then I'd have to support it. If she asked my opinion on it, I would say no. I would say that I would not want her to have to live through and deal with what we do, and just as far as a father, like wanting her to be pure, I guess you'd call it, like just not have the negativity towards the rest of the world and something that sometimes you get that like seeps in, and not be in that yellow alert all the time, and be able to sit down and enjoy, family gatherings and movies or whatever. And obviously with two cops in a house, she's going to learn, to be aware of her surroundings. That's inevitable that we're going to teach her that. So she's already going to be paranoid to a certain extent.
What if she says to you, I want to do what mom does?
Oh, I mean, and that's a thing of pride. Like,
Yeah.
That's awesome that she'd want to do that, because I don't know if she got into specifics of what she does. That takes a very special person to do that. I cannot do, because I lose my temper way too quickly, and she doesn't. She's very good at what she does, and she's successful at it. So if she said something along those lines, yeah, it would hurt because I know what's coming. I know the emotional distress and the everything else that that comes with this, and that my child's going to do that. I think law enforcement too, I've started to notice that lately. The longer I stay in it, the more that it's almost a family gig, if that makes sense. Like, military is the same way.
Right.
Like, if my dad was in the military, I was in the military. Where I'm seeing a whole lot of, my dad was in law enforcement. He worked here, and I liked it. I hung around with Dad. I did a little thing, but it's like a calling. So they've noticed it too. I think it can, once it gets in your blood, it's in your blood, and you're not gonna be able to get it out real easy. Because I know Bullock used to tell us that a bunch. Every time he's come home from work, just about once a month, there was always one night where he's like, I'm done. I'm turning this stuff in. I'm not coming back. Like, this is it. And he said, the next day I woke up and put it on again.
Yeah, that seems to happen a lot.
Yeah. And it did with me. I don't mind telling everybody, like, and everybody that knows me watching this, like, he grouchy sometimes. Like, but I sincerely do enjoy the moments that are worthwhile and wholesome. And when you don't have that in a while, it's because you're not trying to find it. And that's a hard thing to figure out, is that you're focusing so much on the negative that you can't see any of the positive.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would be excited that I would get to hear how law enforcement is in her generation, but I'd also be terrified.
Yeah, it's no telling.
It would be a weird mixture of emotions.
That was a good thing to even bring up, was what is law enforcement going to look like if your child
That's terrifying.
wanted to do this in 21 years.
Yeah, the amount of I think when I was watching Earl's, he said that the respect was different in his time. Well, when I came in, it is what it is now. Like, I didn't get to see that.
So 2014, from 2014 to right now, has it changed?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
it's changed in 10 years. Like,
It's changed.
when I started, it was still a little bit. It was there, but it was very much like, we've all seen what you guys do on YouTube. We know what you're about. Like, what do you mean we? I started yesterday. Like, I don't, I have no idea what you're talking about. In 10 years, I've seen the turnaround of like how long they keep an officer is not there compared to what, you guys that had done it 20 there's a lot
turnover.
A ton more. And in turn, that has done damage to the field training, the pool, because the field training officers are leaving because they're taking all the work. So that it became a pandemic after a while, and then it's starting now to go back on an uphill climb again. Yeah. But it took 4 or 5 years to recover from that. It was COVID. I mean, honestly, COVID, there was a huge change because we were told, don't get into nothing, don't leave some stuff alone because you don't want to get sick. You don't want to get very sick. So that was drilled in the head. So anybody that started during that time didn't receive the full experience of what it's like to be a proactive cop.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine having, number one, to be a trainee in the middle of COVID epidemic. Because you wouldn't get the experience that you need to get.
And that went on how long? And that was several generations of law enforcement that weren't able to do their job, or they weren't shown how to do it because their FTOs were like, man, our hands are tied. I don't know what to tell you. Like, we'll work on it whenever this settles down. So I think that did a lot of damage. Like, in more ways than one, it did a lot of damage to law enforcement.
And for anybody listening, law enforcement didn't stop.
No.
But it was the proactive part of law enforcement that was sometimes told to slow down, because when you're proactive, you're generating call volume yourself.
Yeah.
And so there's a time where if there's an epidemic going on like we experienced, sometimes they ask you to put on the brakes. That's just common sense. That's all that is. I think that's the right call. I think administration should be saying that in that situation. But
was the jail, like, if it broke out in the jail, which it did multiple times, like, everybody's sick in there, so you can't be adding more people. You're literally putting people in jail to get sick. That's going to happen. So there's like, pump the brakes on something, unless it's really a violent physical thing. You need to still do your job. I wasn't saying that, like, we just quit.
Yeah, I think that's
it definitely was adjusted.
I think that's the right call. But from a trainee's perspective, that would probably be one of the worst times to get into law enforcement. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. From an educational perspective.
So when you look at it now, those officers that we're in are 2 and 3 years deep into their career, and they're starting to FTO. And what did they learn?
Well, hopefully they've experienced enough outside of the COVID area to make up for it. I mean, that's one thing you're never short of is call volume, which is experience, in any form of law enforcement, basically. I mean, you're going to get experience. Hopefully they take away enough to where that's been made up. But it's just a period of time I wouldn't want. Listen, I miss law enforcement, man. Every day I think
we miss you there.
Well, every day I think about, is this going to be the time where they'll cut me loose and I can come back talking about my doctors. Yeah. And, it's just something that doesn't leave. But I look at things on the news now and relate to what I was doing, and know a lot of people still on the road today. And it's just you think about them, you wonder about the new policies and how procedures are changing. And this is getting back to your daughter, if she chose to do it 21 years down the road. What will law enforcement actually look like? And I don't know. I think I've got an idea. But I think it's going to be more restrictive. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be less authority. It seems to be the easy answer is me and your wife talked about how many plea bargains happen when it gets to court. Yeah. And it seems to be that's more and more of a way to deal with it. And then there's some states that are saying, well, no cash bond. You get charged, you go to the magistrate's office, and then they give you a promise to appear, and that's it. You're back on the streets within 15 minutes.
Before the ink dries on your report, kind of thing.
That's not so much happening here where we are, but I think it will come. I think as population goes up and the court system gets more backed up.
Overwhelmed, yeah.
Overwhelmed. The jails get more filled. Then some of those relief techniques, which that's what it is.
It's a relief valve, yeah.
It's a valve saying, well, the easy thing is I know he just robbed a convenience store red-handed, but he signed a promise to appear.
Yeah, he'll be at court, yeah.
We got to cut him loose.
Yeah.
So I think I think more relief valves are coming. I'm not saying that law is going to be more lenient. I just think those relief valves are going to be put in place to deal with it in another 20 years. So things that more population, like maybe New York, is already having to deal with. We don't see it here. We're like, that's not going to fly in our neighborhood, and I agree with that. That doesn't fly here. But in 20 years, it might.
I think meth and other narcotics, there'll be a misdemeanor amount.
Because I can see that.
There won't be a felony amount of meth anymore. I think that'll change because there's so much of it. Like, you got way worse. Fentanyl is killing, how many people. They'll start classifying it, kind of be like marijuana. Like, marijuana is whatever.
Well, that's one I hope they don't.
And my generation of law enforcement, marijuana is not looked at, and me personally, like, I'd much rather get meth or fentanyl or, cocaine, heroin, something like that than marijuana. And, I tell somebody that's done this for 30 years that. Like,
you're talking about it as far as an arresting charge.
Right,
Absolutely, yeah.
It could care less. I don't want to say it could care less, but you know what I mean? Like, that's not high on the priority as far as, like, what someone on meth or somebody overdosing on fentanyl will do. So I can see those, not necessarily fentanyl anytime soon, but meth. Yeah. Well, when you started in law enforcement, meth was like probably
number one.
Yeah, number one on the list, and now look where it's at.
Yeah.
Like, there's all kinds of other stuff that's.
Fentanyl was not really on the radar till about the time you started coming in, which was a while.
Yeah.
And I remember getting the first update on that was, you read somebody opened up a car door or something, and they passed out or something from something aerosol, dust particles or whatever, fentanyl. And I was like, we don't see that. We did.
Yeah.
We had an officer. It was I can't remember if he was a corporal or not at the time, but he had seized powder in a Ziploc bag. There was really not powder, it was residue. It was just like the white residue.
The dusting.
The dust on the plastic of a plastic Ziploc bag. So it wasn't like a collection of powder at the bottom of the bag. And it looked like Coke, but you don't know. We've got field test kits for cocaine, and he was doing that. And in the sheriff's office, he was collecting evidence, turning it in, and he opened it up, and I guess just a particle of it had gotten on his fingertip or something, and he may have done like this.
Yeah.
And it ended up being fentanyl. And this was very early on in the fentanyl game, and he passed out. He had to go call the EMS. He was fine. Nothing, pertinent happened, but just that small trace amount was enough to put a very large man on his back. And then I knew fentanyl was serious. Like that, yeah, you don't want to mess with that. And people take a whole pill of that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I don't get it.
No.
I mean, I don't understand that.
No, I think it's pretty well documented by this point what can happen to you.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's changing. I can't imagine. Like, what new narcotic will they have for my daughter's generation of law enforcement? Like,
when I was in high school, fentanyl, that word didn't exist.
No.
That's kind of scary to think about that. So
The first time I saw a meth lab was on a fire department, actually. And they called us for, like, scene lights. And they had hit 5 separate meth labs, which that's not even a thing anymore, and where we're at. It's all transported out over the border.
Yeah.
I remember looking at all the stuff. It's like, this is like common household items. I would never, like me just not even being in law enforcement at the time. And I thought it was wild that somebody was able to do this. And like they were in sheds and like little rundown houses like, with normal.
Mhm.
So yeah, what kind of invention will they? I know there's bee spray. I don't know if you ever dealt with somebody that did the can of bee spray on the filter, like turn it upside down or
All right.
whatever, and like the crystals off of it.
You're teaching me here. I've
Yeah.
never heard of this.
So I hadn't either until another officer with my wife's agency dealt with it, and it's almost a weird sensation, almost like a reaction of PCP, like a negative, like angel dust. Whatever
You're talking
you
about
call it.
coming off like wash spray?
Yeah, it's something that they do
Yeah,
with.
no.
I'm not sure the whole process, but he told me that. And
It's
I'm
got to
like,
be like poison, straight
yeah,
poison.
straight poison. I was like, what other kind of stuff are they going to figure out by the time that she's in? That I mean, you'll be walking around in a hazmat suit. Like if fentanyl is that bad, and you know it always gets worse, right? It doesn't get better. It's kind of like the armor and the bullet. They're always making an armor that'll stop a bullet, and they're always making a bullet that'll go through that armor, and it just continues going. It'll be the same way. It's like, what drug can we make next that is easier to obtain and harder for you to detect? You know, impossible
Yeah.
for a canine to detect. I'm surprised they haven't developed something along those lines that a canine can alert to. It's coming eventually.
Yeah, probably. I think the synthetics parts of, vapes and some of that stuff, they'll probably be able to get a lot of drugs into different vapes.
Oh yeah,
I think that's
I know a
probably-
lot of officers that vape too, so they're not even looking at. But that's their generation. Like
Yeah.
they're not even looking for that to be considered, paraphernalia or whatever.
Yeah. Well, man, I appreciate you coming and talking, giving your
Yeah.
story. I think this is just an opportunity to tell anybody who wants to do this their story. So, I appreciate you taking the time and coming. And I know we could keep on going for hours about doing this. It's a never-ending loop of topics to discuss. But
Oh,
I
yeah.
appreciate you taking the time and coming and talking. And
Absolutely.
I think somebody could be inspired by your story. So it's very much worth telling. I appreciate you, and I need you to stay safe out there, my man.
Absolutely. I hope everybody else is. I guess if I had one thing to tell them, it would be that don't quit. Like if you're called to do this, there's a better day. There's there's a spot for everybody that's called to do this. Whether it be you're the warrant guy, you're the report taking guy, you're the really articulate guy, you're the field training guy. This job needs a whole bunch of people, different
It
types.
does.
It is not just a single type of person that succeeds
Yeah.
in it. It's a smattering. And I've gotten to meet some crazy characters from all over different states and,
Yeah.
even some from different parts of the world. And it's a fantastic job. As somebody told me, and I agree, it's the best, worst job I've ever done.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, my man. It is.
I appreciate you having me and my
Yeah.
wife on, immortalizing my dog now that he's getting ready to retire. Like, that's pretty cool, too.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw a couple pictures up, and
Yeah.
I'll post it into the
Oh, he's my
video
best buddy.
somewhere. But
He's going to retire and eat ice cream now.
well, I'll make sure to get him on the internet so everybody can see him. So, thank you, January.
Thank you. Appreciate it.